Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Podcast, which clearly already, if you are watching and not listening, looks different. We are making a big diversion today off of our traditional conversational path about law of attraction and manifestation, although we are going to go down that path briefly. But may I introduce you to, or reintroduce you to, my husband, Davinder Athwal. Davinder, the listening audience is yours. How would you like to introduce yourself to the millions of people, it's a couple hundred, who are listening right now?
I am Jen's husband, so you can call me Mr. Coffey. How's that?
It's the first time you've ever said that.
That's right. There you go. Have a nice ring to it, though.
It does have a nice ring to it.
Sounds familiar, strangely enough. But,
yeah, I haven't formally changed my name yet either. So we do actually have that option if you choose. Friends, I wanted to take this opportunity just to kind of take a break, honestly, from some of the more serious discussions that I've been having. And also because this might be like the 12th or 13th episode. We're approaching the dozen if we're not there already. And so a great opportunity for me to bring in my first ever guest. You're the first guest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Look at me.
Yeah. And it is special. You are special. And just give everyone an opportunity. I talk about him so much. So I thought I would have some fun in this podcast and just pitch him some 20 questions. But before we do that, and I didn't tell you that I was going to do this because I kind of just decided to right now, how would you, like 30-second elevator speech, somebody says, tell me about yourself, what would you say? Because not everybody knows about you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I am Davinder. My family's from India, grew up in the UK, lived in America. So I kind of think of myself as the quintessential global citizen.
Oh, I like that.
Having lived, or having a connection, I should say, to 3 different continents. And I kind of take things from each one of those. And I think there's good and there's not so good in all of those. But, hopefully the blend is something that actually is quite good.
I like the blend.
Together. Yeah, I'm glad you do, because I'd be in real trouble if you didn't.
And do you know, Davinder, we have been here in Switzerland now long enough that I think a few more weeks we may start blending some of that Swiss culture in.
Jawohl. That's very true. It's really happening to me.
I know. We're so proud of ourselves, and we order in a restaurant, and we do it in English, but we go und.
That's right. Yeah, small baby steps.
Or at the end, danke.
Danke, yeah. Danke schön. That's right.
Yes. So as you likely know, if you've been listening or following me on Instagram, what brought us to Switzerland was Davinder's new job and the onboarding that he's doing here. So we are spending several weeks here. I'm wrapping up my tour in Switzerland and heading back a little bit early so I can get to work on some things while Davinder wraps up here. So before I get on the plane, I wanted to put him behind the mic, as it were. So before I dive into 20 questions, because once we get started, we're going to be off to the races, I'm going to do a little early commercial, if you all don't mind. So, as is the case every week, I love to share with everyone that I do make myself available for one-on-one coaching, whether it is to talk about your life goals and how you can work through the law of attraction and manifestation to make that happen, or just chat about some other life decisions that you may have to make. And any way I can help guide you with my wellness training, I am more than happy to do so. The way that you find out about that is by emailing me, Jennifer@jennifercoffey.com. Again, that's Jennifer@jennifercoffey.com. Are you ready, Davinder?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
For our 20 questions. These are all very serious, controversial. There's politics, there's religion, I'm kidding. There's none of that. Did you panic for a second?
I didn't get that memo, but anyway.
Yeah. I'm throwing in a bonus one in the beginning. Did you or did you not, when you just got home, say, hey, can we do this podcast so we can go out to dinner quick?
I actually did. I did. Guilty of charge.
He's hungry right now.
Yeah. No, in Switzerland, it's...
Well, that too, right?
Yeah.
I'm coming up with all these questions that aren't even on the list. How about this one? Are you tired of cheese yet?
No. That's impossible. How can you... Not good cheese. I mean, I think you can get tired of...
It's all good cheese here.
That's the problem. I think you can get tired of not so good cheese, but when it's really good cheese, I think it's hard to get tired of it.
I'm not tired of the chocolate yet.
See,
That's for
there you
darn
go.
sure.
Yeah.
Although I am having a hard time acclimating to the smell of what?
Melted cheese.
Well, all right, so we went into a fondue restaurant and it was pungent. But that's the good cheese.
I call it an aroma, but okay.
Aromatic. It was aromatic, but I was just like, anyway.
Yeah, you almost gagged. I know.
No, I didn't almost gag. I was just like,
out, yeah.
just acclimating myself. Anyway, the cheese was delicious. Okay. All right, Davinder, here we go. What is your fondest memory?
I've got to say it's got to be the birth of each of my kids. It really is. You go through a lot of training and a lot of classes, and you kind of that's probably the one experience you know is coming. You got a lot of time to prepare for it, and you think about it a lot, and you do all kinds of things. But when it happens, it's just a magical experience. Yeah. And I have 3, as you know, and each one of them was kind of magical in its own way. And when I think about vivid memories and things that can really bring back emotions, it's got to be those moments. It's just there's nothing like it. They say that kids are really hard, but you kind of figure out at some point that it was all worth it. That memory was certainly good. I'm waiting for the other side where it becomes really good, but it'll get there. I mean, they're great kids, but it's they're teenagers and just out of teenage years, so.
I wonder about that as the parent of one child. I have that memory and it is so precious, and I can't, I try to wrap my head around what it would feel like with more than one child, right? They're obviously not going to be the same experiences, but even the feelings aren't the same either, right? They're strong but different.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I think you got it right, Jen. It really is about being different. They're equally magical, equally wonderful, and all the emotion and everything else, but everyone is different, and I felt very different in each one of those. And some of that is because you're the first kid, you're going through some things for the first time, and others you kind of know, but it doesn't take away any. There's just a different level of excitement and emotion each one each time.
I think about that, if I were to have, by the way, this is a sidebar, I posted that video of the vending machine in, where were we? We visited so many places. But in the vending machine, there was Skittles and Red Bull and then a pregnancy test in this vending machine.
Yeah.
And I posted that, and I had people asking me, are you trying to tell us something? Friends, I'm 50 years old. Right. So no. But
you didn't buy one, did you?
I did. The biggest waste of money. No, you know what the brand was called though? Do you remember?
Oh, was it like Baby something?
Maybe Baby.
Maybe Baby. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's memorable, isn't it? You could create a jingle out of that one.
I was going to say, I'm giving a free plug to this pregnancy test with Maybe Baby. Anyway, but no, so that door's closed. That factory's shut. But I do think about if you had, Jen, another child, you would obviously love that child, but that love has to obviously feel different. I don't know. So the closest comparison I could make is when I had 2 cats at one point in my life, and I know that love was strong but different. But good answer there. Of course, that's your fondest memory. All right. So I know that among your many wonderful memories, many involve travel. You've been to many, many places. Is there anywhere left on this earth that you still aspire to travel to?
The one area I have not had as much opportunity to go to is the Far East.
Okay,
so
that's true.
If you think about places like Tokyo or Thailand or any of those kind of off the beaten places, mainly because most of my travel was really business related, and there wasn't, a whole lot of reason to go to those places on business. But I'd love to go to those, and I think that that's a part of the world that certainly is very different to the West and what we're used to. And I'm all about exploring and pushing the boundaries. And I think that could be kind of fun.
He likes to, in fact, he seeks out restaurants where he thinks he is unlikely to be understood speaking English. So he wants to go to the places, and we went to a lovely one last night that did indeed struggle a bit with English. So we were pointing at things in the menu, and that makes me anxious.
It excites me, and as I said to you last night, I think if you really want to know the soul of a place, you got to go to those places because everything else is a sanitized version. And, I've been to enough places that have like the English or the American, kind of veneer that they're almost catering to people that are from those places. And as a result of that, they kind of push what they normally do more towards what's palatable for us. And,
it's
I'm
maybe not as authentic.
Yeah, and I'm not knocking that by any means, but, if I want to go somewhere, I really want to immerse myself in that culture, get to know them, and walk away with something that's unique.
Like you look around and you can tell these folks are locals,
Oh, yeah. They were full-on locals, yeah.
That's great. If you went to the Far East, I know the answer to this question already, but would you ski?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to, as you know, I've skied on kind of most continents, but that's one that I've not yet done. So I would love to go to Mount Fuji and ski in that area. And I'm told the snow is really good.
What makes good snow?
Consistency. So they call it powder. Right. So basically it doesn't clump up, it doesn't ice, and it doesn't, kind of cause you to skid and to slip. So
I slip anyway. I know that from my one-day skiing, which is a whole other conversation. It was cold.
Yeah, it was. No, it was. I mean, it's not normally that cold out west, but unfortunately it was cold when we went. So.
I'm seriously just joking. Yeah. I'm just a lightweight when it comes to skiing, but much respect to those of you who do that on the regular. Okay, so now we are going to get a little bit more on topic when it comes to the stuff that I generally speak about in these podcasts, and that is the law of attraction. So I think we must have touched on this on our first date, kind of talking about the idea of manifesting that which you want, aligning your energy to that which you are trying to bring into your reality. Can you speak to how that has worked in your life? Or I should rephrase because it's working all the time. Can you speak to times where you were focused, you used the idea of thoughts becoming things to create your reality?
Well, until we met and you named what was happening as manifestation and the law of attraction, I never really thought of it like that. But I was aware of it. And I became aware of it actually at a very young age where I realized that if you just become something that you want to be and you just think it and you start acting that way, it happens. I didn't at that age try and understand why, but that kind of served me throughout my life where I realized that, if you can think it and you can think it vividly enough and you can feel it, it actually comes true. So for a bit of time before I met you, I used to go around saying, be careful what you wish for because it'll come true, right? And the only thing is, what's the cost of that, which is something we don't always think about. After we got together, you named what it was, and I've, been on the quiet researching, kind of law of attraction stuff like that. You know how I am, right? If I get curious about something or intrigued about something, I like to go to the nth degree. And, everything that I've learned is exactly what I've been experiencing. So I think it's, it's kind of in a way almost blows your mind that life can be that simple.
Yeah.
In a way. But at the same time, applying it and sticking with it and actually, having the confidence and the faith can be very trying at times. And I will say, since we've met, right, I mean, I was manifesting some things and, there are times when you think, does this really work? I don't know. Maybe I've been, kind of kidding myself. But as you've taught me, when things don't happen the way you want them to happen immediately, it's probably because there's something better along the way. And it's worth waiting for. Absolutely. So yeah, it's been a really good, it's been a nice kind of like closing that loop with you, I think, because I always had that in my life and I never really stopped to think why it was. I just assumed that's how it was. But, being more aware of it actually helps focus that and channel that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Has it worked for you professionally?
I think it has. I would say it has, yeah. And, I'd say kind of coming to Switzerland, for example, is a great example of that. I mean, not that I was specifically thinking about Switzerland, or Atlanta for that matter, but it's a weirdest thing. About 6 months before this opportunity came up, I was asking myself the question, if I could live anywhere in the U.S., where would it be? And I've lived in a bunch of different places, and out of all of those, I felt the most livable was in the Carolinas. And, I think that area is just, actually really nice from a livability perspective. And, Georgia's just one state over. It's interesting. The only thing I didn't like about living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, was that there was no big city nearby. You had to drive 5 hours to Washington, D.C. or Atlanta. This actually came in spades where I've got that livability with a big city on the doorstep. So, that's a part of it. And I was kind of toying around with the idea of like, man, it'd be lovely. I've got the whole thing about the UK. I wanted to go back there.
Yeah.
And I was asking myself, if I wanted to live somewhere else in Europe, where would that be? I was going through Paris or France and, everywhere else I've been. And I kind of landed on Switzerland. I'm like, I think Switzerland would be the next place after the UK. So, yeah, there we go.
And here I am manifesting more travel and being able to explore the world, not necessarily pinpointing any one particular place. And to your point, and I'll share with our listeners, that I think, I didn't even really think about it, but it's such a great example of you're manifesting something and it comes to you in a way that you would never have predicted. So a person can be manifesting more travel, thinking deep down, well, what I'm manifesting is the money for travel. I'm manifesting an open schedule for travel and all of the minutia, the house. And instead, the universe goes, actually, you're not going to need to worry about any of that because you're going to travel and it's going to be via a job that you love. So it can come to you in very unexpected ways and even better than what you would have initially expected. Okay, so moving on to our next question. And of course, we have to balance out the deep and the heavy with some of the fun ones too. This is kind of a dark one, right? Because it involves like acknowledging that there is an end to your life at some point. But it's true. If you knew that end was coming and you could select your last meal, I mean, the dark way of asking this question, what's your death row meal, right? So what's your last meal? It could be anything. You don't have to worry about
calories,
fat, cholesterol, nothing. Just go for it. Last meal. Actually, I have no idea what the answer to this question is.
It probably would depend on the week, to be honest with you.
What?
Well, it would depend on what, how I was feeling that particular week.
No, I'm asking you now.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Depends on the week.
Well, I like variety, as you know.
Okay. This isn't, being entered into court or something.
Oh, okay. So you're not going to hold me to that.
No. I hope I'm not ever cooking your last meal.
Yeah, me too, actually. I hope it's never called that, by the way. That's a very, convict-y ring to it. Your last meal.
I know.
The one thing here's what I would say. The one thing I could eat and not ever say no to more would probably be some kind of salmon.
Okay, I was way off.
What were you thinking?
I thought it would have been steak.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that'd be my last meal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's. I enjoy a good steak, but if I'd probably gravitate more toward like a salmon type of a dish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sides, dessert, anything?
Oh boy, now
come on, you got some amazing chef just sitting there.
I'd probably have like a side of probably raclette.
You know what?
Yeah.
I take it back. It apparently does depend on the week because right now he's got cheese on the brain. Okay.
That, and I'm pretty full for dessert. I'd have the kirsch torta.
I'm sorry, I'm not a fan. Yeah.
Have enough of it.
I'm always leery of, I guess because of my TV presenter background. Internally, I feel bad saying that I don't like something, right?
Yeah.
Not a fan of kirsch torte. Sorry.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Sorry to the Swiss.
Yeah, I am. I'm not a big sweet tooth kind of guy, and that's nothing sweet, really. But it's
there's not much sweet about it. It's all booze, baby.
Yeah. I think it's perfect for a last meal, but
You know what? Touche. Maybe you're right. Okay. Did you always want to have the job you have now? So you ask a teenager, what do you think you're going to be when you grow up? And in my head, I was going to be a lawyer. I was an attorney. furthest thing from that. What did you want to be?
So I wanted to be in business.
Okay.
But would it have been the job that I'm in? Absolutely not. I had no conception at that age that this was even a thing.
Sure.
Right. But I kind of, maybe going back to the question about manifesting, right? I probably would have been manifesting the kind of lifestyle that I have, because as a kid, you kind of tend to think about that, right? And, kind of driving up to an office and working in an office. And, if I visualize what I was visualizing back then, that's kind of what, this job kind of gives me. So it's a dream job from that.
Of course, you're pulling up to that office in a particular car, I'm sure.
It's all part of, teenage boyhood, isn't it? Right?
Hey, that's what manifesting is. So business, but not necessarily the financial side of business or technology.
No, absolutely not.
Got
it's
it.
just
Got
like
it.
a fancy building and
Here's a bonus question. Did you ever have a weird job, like, something that's not aligned with, like one time I was a mascot for a radio station. I had to dress up like a big bumblebee.
Yeah, I'm in finance. I'm like a boring kind of person.
Yeah,
I don't have your...
No bumblebee costumes. It's never too late.
All right, as part of one of my jobs, I did dress up as the Wicked Witch of the East. And that was for a charity event to do with, kind of collecting funds for, some organizations that I was particularly, kind of fond of.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. That
dressed up like a witch.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Cool.
It went over quite well, actually.
That's a future Halloween idea then. Okay. Name for me, please, a surprising thing still on your bucket list.
Well, maybe not surprising, but I have a passion that I want to learn to fly a plane.
Oh, I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
And so I've completed the written test, right? Because you got to do a written theory bit, then they take you up in a plane. So I did that a few years ago. But when I did it, I couldn't go up because the weather was so abysmal, and they don't take you up if the weather is too windy or too rainy or whatever it was. So then, life moves on and things happen. I haven't had a chance to go back. But that's on the bucket list of things to do.
Would you have to take the written test over? Does it expire?
I probably would want to because I don't remember all of it. But,
Yes, in fact, please take that test. What am I thinking?
Might be a good idea. Yeah.
What, 20 years ago? I'm sure you remember all of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I hope you follow through with that.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I think it would be a lot of fun, actually, to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I say that. I'm not in the plane. But, hey, if we got up in a helicopter... for the wedding, which was kind of a little scary, a little bit.
Was it really?
I think moments like that, it's like when I jumped out of a plane. Like, if you kind of aren't really thinking about just how dangerous potentially it is what you're doing at that time. And with the helicopter, really not as dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But like you're about to jump out of a plane, you go, wow, is this really the wise thing for, a mom to be doing, jumping out of the plane? But it's too late then.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of moments in that helicopter where I was like, wow. I was thinking about how many of the most important people in my life were in this helicopter in that moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, that wasn't great risk management, but yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's like Coca-Cola putting all the recipe, the people who know the recipe, they don't put them in the same plane, Okay. All right. So let's pretend that we're going to a karaoke bar, which we've never done, bucket list, and you got to get up there to sing a song. You get to see the lyrics. You don't have to know all the words, but you can pick any song for karaoke. What would it be? I think I have a guess, but you say it first, and I'll tell you what my guess is.
All right. If I had to do that, I'd probably try and do something like Sledgehammer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that is a good one.
Yeah,
because it's slow.
Yeah,
it's more talky.
Yeah, that's risk management right there, isn't it?
Risk management. Although people don't realize, well, a lot of people do realize this, but like people will go up to sing karaoke thinking that the goal is to get up there and just nail it. Actually, that's not the goal. Everybody up there wants you to screw it up. Yeah. Because that's entertainment. Not because they want you to fail. It's just like, haha, this is cute and funny. But yes, I would agree. Sledgehammer's a good one. I would have thought for sure it was Bohemian Rhapsody, but in retrospect, that's too long.
It's
You wouldn't
too
want to be
long,
up there
it's
for
too
8
long, and I'd have to wear very tight pants.
In that case, Bohemian Rhapsody it is.
Right. Hey, sidebar though, Jen, I'm actually an acknowledged karaoke champion. I was one time
Acknowledged by whom?
by my colleagues in China.
right.
So I was in China one time, and in China they actually
Were you their superior at the time?
I was their superior at the time.
I see.
But it's a very big thing there. They have these karaoke rooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we go out to dinner here. They go out to karaoke, and you go to this studio, and there's like just a bunch of studios where you just go in, and there's food and drink and all that stuff in there. But the acoustics are amazing.
Are really good.
Right?
So it's like when you're singing in the shower because everybody sounds
it actually
good.
is even better than that. Believe it or not, right?
Right,
It actually
right.
compensates for a lot. So the biggest challenge is kind of like being able to read the words quickly enough because the words are in English, right? And because it's my native language, and for my team, it actually became very easy for me, and they were super impressed. So
Nice.
So there you go. I'm an
Never would have guessed.
I'm glad you asked that question.
And now, I wonder if there's a karaoke bar in Zug, Switzerland.
No, it's got to be a studio, and it's got to be filled with people.
I see it. Yeah, that's right. And it has to be filled with people who've had a couple of drinks.
That's right.
So that everything you sing sounds great. Okay, so you kind of answered this already, but I want to back up.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you where you are from. Now, the reason I ask you this, and he already knows this, right? But people will ask, hey, where's your husband from? And what they're asking is it's a nuanced question, right? Because you think about it, when we're asking somebody, where are they from? Do we really want to know where they're born? Do we want to know where they lived the bulk of their life? Do we want to know what their ancestral heritage is? And all three of these could be very different answers, right? So actually, how do you answer that question when people ask? Do you just tell them your whole life story, or how do you answer it?
No, I mean, I think, look, when you ask me that question, I would always default to I'm from the UK.
Okay.
And that's because that's where my formative years were. That's kind of where I really grew up. And, I kind of, as I identify with that place in a way that I, don't identify as much with other places. Even though it's interesting because in some ways the United States is now more home than, the UK is. But I've got a fondness for that place, and it was very good to me. And, that's just something I hold in very high regard. But you're right. Asking the question, where are you from? I mean, in my case, it literally is three different answers, right? Because obviously I'm not, Western by descent. From India, which is an East Asian country for folks that might not know. But I'm part of that culture, right? I grew up with that culture. So, our home was in the UK, but it was a very traditional, I'd say, Indian household. So I picked up a lot of that culture. Having, though, lived in the UK, I picked up that culture as well, right? And, that's a big part of my life. And then the last, kind of 25, 30 years has been in the U.S., and I like to think that I've become, Americanized as well. So, I mean, the short answer is I'm British, but,
And when you said that, you even said it, I'm British.
Well, it comes and goes, doesn't it?
Well, lucky for me, I still hear it as a very British accent. And what's funny is when we go to England, people will say, you don't have much of an accent. And I'm sitting here going, what? I love it. I love the accent. Yeah.
Just wait till the Indian accent breaks out, because,
And he does a very good one of those too.
They all take turns. So.
That's right. That's right. I'm told that I don't sound like I have much of any accent other than just generic American, but if I do go back to New Orleans, it definitely comes. A little bit of Cajun definitely comes out. I think you got to be around your family for it to.
Absolutely. You pick it up.
And the first time I ever heard you speaking in Punjab with your family, I was like, "Who is this person?" Because he had never told me that he could speak this language, and I mean, of course he can, but I hadn't heard it. Yeah. Okay. If you could master any skill immediately, what would it be? I like this question. It made me think.
Yeah, well, and with that, I'd love to be able to read people's minds.
But would you really?
Yeah, I would.
Oh God, it's terrifying to me. I would never want to do that. I don't know.
It makes it easier. You have to guess what people are thinking.
Yeah. I feel like to some extent we already get a taste of that with social media.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's
you're right. Yeah.
Just like anything else, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. So I don't know. I thought about like being able to speak any language, but then we kind of can with so many, Google Translate. And then I thought, okay, what about, I guess if we're also including like things that people can't do, like, can I fly? Like, would I want to do that? Would I want to have amazing physical skill or something like that? It makes you think. I don't have a definitive answer. But.
And maybe I'm kind of, overweighting kind of work stuff, right? Because, I spend most of my time at work trying to, quote, build consensus.
Yes,
and,
negotiate.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a heck of a lot easier because people never tell you what they really think. They just kind of ask certain questions or they make certain comments. And
like if you ask me where I want to go for dinner.
There you go. That's right. What are you really thinking?
No, it's fine. Anywhere. Please say Chinese. Please.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. God forbid there is a fire in your house. But if there is, besides people or Madam Mim, what would you rescue?
There's a couple of bottles of wine in the cellar, right?
Okay.
That are probably at this point close to 25 plus years old.
Okay.
And it's hard to replace those.
Grab the wine. Got it.
The wine, and probably my watches, I think.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Wine and watches.
Wine and watches, yeah.
You learn a lot about a person, right?
The wine, because I think, there's
almost irreplaceable.
Them,
yeah,
irreplaceable.
sure. I'm not judging that.
Yeah, and the watches are the same way. They kind of are markers of certain points or certain milestones in my life, and it's a good memory of that.
I love that.
Because, our life is so digital these days, like photo albums.
Yeah,
and
pictures are online.
Yeah, I'm very good about, uploading all that stuff. I don't have to worry about that.
That is true. Just low-key, if you hadn't said the watch I gave you, I was going to be upset.
Aren't you wearing it? Well, that's not a problem because it's always on.
That's right. You don't have to worry about that because it's on your person.
About my person.
It's about your person. Okay. All right. So I said that one. All right. Oh, I like this one. Okay. You can have dinner with any, I say famous person, but in fact, I am going to say famous person because many of us would choose like family members who have passed or something like that. If I said just anybody. But let's go with like a big figure. You can have dinner with any historical figure, dead or alive. Who would it be?
Well, it's funny because I was going to say a family member, right?
Yeah, I know, but that also, I'm kind of letting you off the hook of even having to think about that because of course you would, right?
Well, but there's someone very specific though.
Okay, well then let's hear it.
So it's my granddad, my paternal granddad. Right?
Can I tell everybody what I call him?
So that's my maternal granddad.
Oh, okay,
actually, right?
okay.
And it's related, right? Because I never had a chance to meet my paternal granddad.
I see.
My dad's dad, he died when my dad was a Nipperuni. So, yeah, unfortunately. So I never had a chance to meet him, but I'm intrigued by him because my dad comes from a rural, not affluent family by any means. But his dad actually somehow put himself through school, educated himself, and had a really good job, right, back in the early 30s in India.
Wow.
And, what I found out when I went back is there's a lot of respect for the family because of this individual. And, the way that I've heard the stories is he had designs on sending my dad and his brothers to school in England because he had the wherewithal to do that, right? So it was, kind of would have been a very different outcome for my dad and for me. But he died, unfortunately, at a very early age, and my dad's life and, his brother's lives took a very sharp kind of turn to a very different place. So, he's someone I would just love to meet because, like, how did he go from a family that really was illiterate and didn't have the means, but through his own hard work and grit, maybe he was manifesting, right? Somehow or other, he got to a point where he could actually, kind of provide his family with things that were unthinkable for generations before and, unfortunately, in this case, generations after. But yeah, and I miss kind of just knowing him, or having the opportunity to know him.
Do you kind of feel like you have created a connection to him, even though you've never met?
I kind of feel there's something there. It's hard to explain. I was talking to my dad about this one time. We're just talking about how life has been and how it's, basically come around. The old thing they talk about how, things don't always, are never the same, but they rhyme, right? And I kind of, feel blessed, by the way. I feel very blessed in my life to have what I have and, kind of accomplished. And I don't take that as me. I take that as there's some greater, kind of guiding hand or guiding power. And I'm wondering if, either the same thing.
They're looking out for you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I think that's why, I would really have loved to have met him or have a chance to meet him.
I love that.
Yeah. Not famous, but there you go,
No, what? I love hearing you talk about your ancestors, your predecessors as you were, because your other grandfather has an amazing story too. And the more I learn about, and this is true for anybody's, lineage, if you're familiar with your ancestry, there are stories that you tell and you realize, famous or not, they are worthy of fame because they've, they may not be in record books or on everyone's lips, but they've accomplished some pretty amazing things. So I accept that answer.
Okay. All right.
Not that you
Mahatma
need me
Gandhi's
to.
the other one.
Right.
I mean, they have an interesting dude right there.
There's somebody out there going, no, you said famous. So there you go.
So for that person, Mahatma Gandhi.
I think that would make an amazing 3-person meal. If I'm
That
honest.
actually,
So
that
there
really
you
would,
go.
yeah.
There
Really
you go.
would.
Okay. If you had to change your first name, what would it be?
Oh, I'm having so much fun with my name because there's variations of it somehow, which, Davinder, it's endless. So I'm kind of having so much fun. I haven't really had a,
Okay, but you have to change it.
All right, Christopher.
Is that you just picked a random name?
No.
Okay.
Actually, when I was, like a teenager and I was trying to fit in more with the local, kids, that was the name I would have picked for myself.
Okay.
I don't know why, but that's what I picked.
No, it's good. It's a good, strong name, but I like Davinder.
All right. Good, me too.
No one's making you change your name. Okay. The oldest piece of clothing that you have, and why do you still wear it?
Okay. It would be my pair of shoes.
Okay.
Mainly because I don't wear out. And the ones that I have are old, really old. They are very seasonal, so I can only wear them for maybe a month a year because they're actually kind of open weave and very good for the hot temperatures.
Okay.
So I think because I only wear them 1 month a year at most, they've kind of lasted about 20 years at this point. So
I would have been absolutely shocked if you told me it was some old T-shirt or something, because that is not.
Oh no, I'm very good about rotating those out because they just don't hold up so well really.
They don't make them like they used to.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. What is a food you love that everyone else hates? Which is a strong phrase. Not everyone else, but you know what I mean.
So have you seen that jar of pickles? The Indian pickles. I mean, they're quite potent. You gotta be careful.
Wait, did I try one of those?
You did. When I made you
remember.
that breakfast, they're a little, potent,
I
right?
remember.
Yeah. There you go. See, most people have that reaction. So, but I like those, and I've got to say, I had a really good friend, neighbor in Connecticut, Mike Ranahan. Complete, kind of, he sounds very Irish, right?
Yeah.
And this is a guy who's not used to eating a lot of flavor, let's say, but he loved that.
He loved it.
He loved it. His wife used to hate him, kinda. But yeah, the two of us would have a lot of fun with beers and that stuff, but pretty much no one else really cared very much.
Now that I think about it, I bet that most people's answer to that question is something that is unique to their culture. That they've adapted, or they, developed a really strong affinity for, and everybody else is like, why?
Well, look, not to be kind of generic about this stuff, but I think in the U.S., food in general has become such a, what's the lowest common denominator?
It has become that.
Right? So it's kind of hard to find something that's going to be offensive because that's just not the cuisine, right? But you go to some of these other places, for example, India has stuff like that. And I, on that topic, by the way, I've eaten some very, very interesting things on my travels. And you find that, when you go out of the U.S., you find some, pretty, what we call crazy ideas for food, but, they exist out there.
They do. And I would agree with you. I feel like even just in my lifetime, I've noticed that, and I don't know if it's because restaurants are just trying to avoid someone saying that it's too salty or too spicy, but it has become a little more homogenous. Bland.
Yeah,
I don't know.
More bland, yeah.
And I'm growing up in New Orleans, I'm bring the Tabasco. But right there with you. Okay. Okay. Now, for those who don't know Davinder very well, I should let you know that amongst his many passions, I consider him a Renaissance man, he loves wine. So I'm curious. Again, I think I know the answer to this, but we'll see. What is the best wine you've ever had? Ever. So far.
Yeah, let me preface that by saying, I realize that my taste in wine has an upper limit, right? So, you can spend literally tens of thousands of dollars, right?
How good can it get?
So I realize there's a limit. So, within that framework, right, of kind of within my limits.
Well, yeah, but even, sorry to interrupt, but like even the best isn't necessarily the most expensive. You don't even have to have that.
I agree. Yeah. But so I've not been drinking stuff that's like tens of thousands of dollars. But
as your wife, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. But I would say without doubt, actually, the best wine I've ever had was actually a bottle of champagne. It was it was a Heidsieck Millionaire, which is a champagne. And there's a vintage from the 90s, the mid 90s, like 95 in particular, which is kind of just perfect at its peak right now. Yeah. And you and I had a chance to enjoy that.
That was really good.
Yeah. That was by far the top one.
We'll have to track another one down. If anyone's listening and you have one of those just knocking about, Jennifer at jennifercoffey.com. Okay. Well, bonus question. Is there a wine you've not yet had that you kind of dream about?
I like some Bordeaux's, right? There are some Bordeaux wines that are actually really good. Left Bank, that's kind of where I tend to, like most of them. In terms of labels, it's not as important. It's kind of like more just Left Bank, the year. And some of those actually really sing to me. And I'd like to explore more of that, actually. So I don't have anything in mind.
Well, I think we're just going to have to travel there.
I think that's where I'm going. I'm going to have to go travel there and do a little tour. But those wines, I just love them. I'd love to kind of find a favorite out there.
That is great. All right, Davinder, tell everyone, honestly, how do you feel about Jen's Christmas obsession?
Well, I really love Christmas. Before I met you, I just didn't have it going for so long, but it's actually I'm quite appreciative now though, because in a way it's it is just the decorations and the feeling and the atmosphere. It does bring a lot of joy, right? It does bring, a different mindset, and it just kind of like, you walk into the house, just lifts your mind up.
Oh, good.
So, in a way, I think the more of that, the better.
Yay! Wait, could you say that again into
the more, the better.
There we go.
But 2 months is pretty good though, babe. Otherwise, it'll be the non-Christmas month.
No. I do have to draw the line.
But I gotta say, you do it really well though. And,
thanks.
You do. It is very tasteful. It's, it's not overdone. It's just a nice low amount of presence of the season until you get to the finale, and then we have a big blowout. But I love it.
Again, for those who don't know, I am completely obsessed with Christmas, and I start decorating the house on November 1st, and that I think that was probably the one thing where Davinder was like, "Wow, November 1st, okay, yeah," and he just rolls with it. He's great. Yeah, but it does take about a month and a half for the house to stop smelling like balsam pine, but I don't have a problem with that. Okay. Please, your favorite book.
There's a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. And, I read that a couple of years ago, and it actually kind of resonates with me in a way because this is a psychologist from UPenn, actually, who wrote the book. And what he's doing is he's basically taking, strands of different thinking. So Eastern culture, Western culture. And his whole point is like there's no such thing as like the perfect culture. In terms of like, how do you find happiness, right? It's a balance. Mm-hmm. And, there's some things that he talks about in the book about how to bring happiness into your life. And it's simple stuff, actually. It always is, right? But it's stuff that we kind of take for granted or we don't think about. But that's been a really, along with the manifestation, that's been another really big impact on my life and the way I try and live it and the way I try and, bring happiness into my life. Biggest takeaway, though, from that book was not to confuse success with happiness, right? And I do think a lot of times we get confused because we think that chasing success will bring happiness, but it never does because they're two separate things. And a lot of times chasing success causes you to do things, that may be counter to what's really...
Right, pushes some of the more genuine happiness away.
Yeah.
Well, guess what book I'm ordering right after this is recorded. Yeah. Love that. Okay, we're almost done. You can go back in time to... I love thinking about this one. You can go back in time to any era, anywhere. Where and when would it be?
Easy for me. That would be...
I got like a million of them. I can't decide.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up as a big fan of the King Arthur legend in the UK, right? And, growing up as a kid in the UK, kind of like knights and...
Okay, I'm sorry. It's not like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I hate to break it to you. It's not like that.
No, I was thinking about, there's some other, kind of period pieces. That's
okay.
Right? But yeah, just the idea of like that whole medieval, like lifestyle, would have been quite fascinating.
Back to Camelot then.
Back to Camelot, yeah. And there's actually a place in close to Wales, by the way, called Tintagel, which is where the the whole kind of mythology, I guess, is based. And next time we get over that way, I would love to go visit that.
Let's go. Oh, I love it. I'm all over the map. Sometimes I'm like Italy during the Renaissance or the Old West or I don't know. Okay. This last question I'm asking Davinder because it will compel him to say to a broad audience the answer. Please, Davinder, tell everyone, how did we meet?
Well, it was, destiny, wasn't it?
Can you be more specific?
It was online. Bumble. All right, I'll say it. We met on Bumble. We met on Bumble, and for folks that may not know, right? I mean, before I went on Bumble, I was, kind of thinking about meeting people the old-fashioned way, in real life. And in my mind, for some reason, that was not the way to meet people. I don't know why. It was just a hang-up that I had. And we won't rehash the story as to how I got onto there, but it was basically just so I'd have to explain to a good friend of mine why I wasn't on there, who was an executive there. But here you go. It all worked out.
It all worked out. I make him answer that because when we were first dating, he was like, well, if somebody asks, you answer the question.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, you're going to answer the question.
Yeah. Well.
And I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Absolutely.
Davinder, thank you so much for doing this, for sharing your pre-dinner time with everybody. I know you'd love to be drinking a martini right now and just...
I've got to be two now, but
And next round, I'll grill him with, way riskier questions, I promise. Probably.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right.
Love you, babe.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We are back on track next week, although I likely will be recording back in the States. So I'll be sharing with you some of the lessons that Switzerland has taught me. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.